my partner's are.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Happy Friday. We are here at the home of the Hurricanes, right on the edge of Coral Gables. That is Duffy's Tavern, the classic Duffy's Tavern, the original, the real deal. Pete's home away from home. Everybody's home away from home. If you are a Canes fan in Miami, Florida, how we doing?
Doing great, man. I think I've said it every show this week, ready to just move past last week. I think we are as much past it as we can be at this point and just ready for tomorrow, man. I think that as we have our next guest on here, Lance, who's always great with us, he's probably going to have to drop some truth bombs on us here based on what we saw last week. And unfortunately, he kind of saw this game plan on a week ago on this show. He pretty much laid out how Miami could get beat by Louisville, and turned out to be the case. So we want to stick around for what he's got to say.
Yeah, no, always good to hear from Lance. And look, you want to hear some people that are going to be right on. Talk to Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about is injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. So listen, last time we got a little preview of what was going to happen in the Louisville game. Unfortunately, we didn't expect the outcome, but got certainly the details of how it might go. So let's hope for a better outcome and a better report here from the man himself, Hurricane Vision on Twitter, Lance Roffers on CanesInsight.com, 7.6 million posts and counting. Let's bring him in. Lance Roffers. Lance, how we doing?
Hey, not bad. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Oh, doing awesome, man. I'm excited. Very excited to announce. I know this is by popular demand. There's going to be a little regular thing now on Fridays, and we have someone to thank for that, Lance.
Yeah, we do. Definitely. I want to thank Canada Financial for, sponsoring our spot here. And, I'm passionate about finance. That's what I do with my myself and my day job. And so it was cool that, someone like myself, a transplant fan and someone who still stays engaged with our Canes. He's kind of one of us, as you think, suffered for many years with us and tries to get down when he can. And, we had a cool meeting with him, got a chance to meet him and talk through things. So I'm excited to have that partnership. So.
Yeah, Sebastian, longtime Canes fan, hardcore Canes fan. The guy's a season ticket holder, and he lives in Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised in Miami. There you see the website right there, CanadaFinancial.com, CANNATA financial.com. And look, I'm a small business owner. I know there's a lot of small business owners listening to the podcast, and you don't want to spend your life buried in spreadsheets. I know I don't. I would rather be trying to figure out ways to grow CanesInsight, or maybe just watching film, right? Trying to make sure I'm asking you good questions, watching Huddle on the latest recruits. So Canada Financial will help business owners get back their time, their peace of mind, and what's more valuable than your time. Instead of dealing with all the bookkeeping, accounting, and the stuff that you don't want to deal with, they will handle that for you. Monthly financials, cash flow clarity. They'll become your outsourced accounting team, so you don't have to waste hours figuring it out for yourself. Bookkeeping is important. It's not just important, it is critical. But if you don't have a clear picture of your numbers, you're going to be making decisions in the dark. You can either figure it out yourself, basically train yourself in something you might have to be trained with, spend hours and hours of your life doing it, or you can deal with the pros at Canada Financial. Stop being your own accountant. Start being the CEO. Visit CanadaFinancial.com. That's CANNATA financial.com, or call text Sebastian at 786-213-3909 to schedule a free consultation, or just talk Canes. He is a hardcore Canes guy on top of being the person who's going to take this load off your back and allow you to get back to being the CEO of your small business. And best news of all, he'll offer a discount for people who mention CanesInsight. So tell them you're from CanesInsight, get a nice discount, and get on your way, man. So small business owners out there, again, me being one of them, I know how important it is. I hate spreadsheets. I can barely deal with them, Lance. I know you deal with these constantly. I get nervous the second I see them. So I'd rather focus on CanesInsight and doing cool stuff like this with you. Thanks to our guy, Sebastian at Canada Financial. So without further ado, let's get into it, man. You laid out the game plan, and I'm raising my hand because I was saying, look, man, I don't see Louisville getting it done here because their running game was completely abysmal in the games that I watched. Their pass blocking was as bad as I saw. So, yeah, I can see all these things that can do to hurt us, but ultimately it's going to crumble with those two weaknesses. Turns out I was dead wrong. They executed the game plan that you basically laid out on this show last week, play for play. So how'd they do it?
Yeah, one of the wrinkles that they put in that maybe I hadn't seen them do quite as much on film coming in was they really neutralized Ruben Bain with cut blocks at the line of scrimmage. So they really tried to get into his legs, right at the snap and get him thinking about that, right? And what that also does is get his hands down. So, they got that quick passing game. They really wanted Miller Moss to kind of have his first read and be able to distribute the ball quickly. And one of the ways they dealt with Bain was really just trying to get into his legs early and getting the ball out quick. I also feel like we maybe, kind of let down the game plan just a little bit early on by allowing Bell, to do some of the things that I did lay out last week, right, as what his strengths were. They really killed us on those intermediate crossers, and then that fade ball that he's really done so well with down the sideline on the boundary and hit us with that a couple of different times as well. So he had some big plays. It was not great early. I didn't think from a anticipation standpoint. We also had one of our players kind of talk about Poiser come out afterwards and say they did some things that maybe they didn't see on film. It's probably some of those nuanced route combinations where they, did switches and the depth that they would release out to kind of mess with the rules that Miami has in their secondary. And not to get too technical on things, but, whenever I talk about rules, a lot of times, defensive backs, whenever they're masking secondary, it's if this guy does this, you take this, or if he, goes vertical, you take the number 1 or the number 2. And when you break rules by switching those numbers on the fly. And if your defensive backs, don't understand their responsibility, like inside and out, and think, well, he's still the 1 or he's become the 2, you get some of those busts that you see and allow some of those early explosives that we saw. And then, to Miami's credit and Heatherman's credit, they did adjust. And actually the defense after that fact really played a good game. They played well enough to win. It was, some of the offensive shortcomings and turnovers that really let them down later.
Lance, you just mentioned that they did recover defensively there. I will say I probably expect a lot of teams to do some of the stuff that we saw from Louisville, although they don't have there's not going to be many teams with anywhere near the talent at the skill positions that Louisville had. But, what could they have done to combat some of the stuff with the quick game, in your opinion? And again, we're probably going to see some similar concepts thrown at them along the way here.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm having maybe a slow or a laggy network this morning. So if you guys kind of hear me going in and out, please let me know.
No, you sound great.
But yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that. So realistically, it was one of the adjustments that you saw, right, where we did pressure a little bit more. As far as when I say pressure, I don't mean the quarterback, I mean the receivers, right? We definitely. So when you hear press, there's really 2 different ways that an individual presses, right? So press can be up on a receiver and then you mirror him, which is just what it sounds like, right? You try and do the same actions that the receiver does at their release and then gets into their pattern, but you're not actually being physical with them at the line of scrimmage, right? And that's one of the things that our defensive backs tend to do. Really, we tend to play a lot of mirror coverage. We tend to play a lot of bail coverage where we give a press look and then bail out, right? And then the other type of press coverage that you can play is what people often think of, right? It's the one where you're physical with the individual receiver at the line of scrimmage. You're trying to get hands on. Maybe you're doing what is called a reroute, where you're not actually going to carry them deep or into the vertical, but at the line of scrimmage, you're trying to jam them and get them to do an outside release. I brought this up last week on the podcast where they're really trying to set up formations to where they can get inside releases to get into those routes faster. I definitely feel like Miami defensively allowed them to get those inside releases early on more than I would have, but I'm not the coach. I'm not trying to say I'm better, smarter, any of those things. I'm just saying what I would have done. And ways that Miami combated it in this particular game is by being more physical with them at the line of scrimmage. We exaggerated our inside alignment against the receivers to force them to have to take an extra half step. And what that extra half step does is allows for more depth from the linebackers when they realize it's a pass and not a run play. What those RPOs do is they just constantly put that bail linebacker in conflict. And, he's got to decide, is this run? Is this pass? And if he's a half step late, right, that window behind him is open, where if he's able to get that extra half step, extra yard depth, he can then influence that throw a little bit more. We saw early on that they were hitting that window behind the bail linebacker, over and over. And the other thing that they were really doing offensively was they were hitting some of those C gap runs outside to where they were able to get those 6 and 7 yard runs early on. And Louisville in 3rd and 2 is really a recipe for a loss because I believe Brom does such a good job of scheming against, those short yardage plays. Because that's what he wants to do is run that short game. And I talked about it, that he wants efficiency and volume, right? He's not trying to hit the 50-yard fly routes on you all the time. He wants to get in that 2nd and 2 and 3rd and 2 and then just repeatedly nick you. And that's what happened early on.
Switching to the offense, because really, like you said, the defense got hit in the mouth. And I think that set the tone for the game in many ways and changed the way the game was flowing. But ultimately, the offense probably the reason why we lost this game. If you're going to assign a hierarchy of blame, looking back on it's easy to say, 4 turnovers. That's pretty good recipe to lose. Digging into the 4 turnovers, what issue did you see? It could be different for each one, or just overall, what's your takeaway from the turnovers that we saw? What needs to be corrected going forward, other than, hey, don't turn it over?
Yeah, here at CanesInSight, we want to be positive. We want to talk about the positive as much as we can. But in this particular one, I will say I'm a little concerned. I'm a little concerned in what I saw, and I'll tell you why. Last year at Georgia, when I did a very in-depth review of Beck and some of the interceptions and what had changed from 23 to 24, I saw that defenses were doing a good job of pattern matching and giving him half-half looks, which confused him. And when you combined that with pressure, he tended to throw into those looks blindly. I saw that again in this game. I saw Louisville played a lot of quarter, half, quarter shells. They mixed in pattern match nickel schemes. And really
Stop right there, Lance, because I want to go over these concepts. When you say quarter, half, just what do you explain to the person listening who's just hearing that and kind of eyes glazing over? What do you mean by that? And then we'll get into pattern matching.
Yeah, sure. So when you think of, and I'll try and just simplify it, when you think of a typical cover 4, right, where you could call that quarters as well, right, where you just basically are splitting the field in the deep area into quarters, right? And so you've got 4 individuals dropping into each of the 4 quarters if you split a field evenly. So that's going to be your quarters. So one half of it, your defense is playing quarters. So you've got 2 guys taking that half, right, dropping into your quarters. And then a half is really you need a stronger cornerback on that side oftentimes, and they'll take and play cover 2 on that side. So now you just have one safety kind of, helping with that half. You've got a boundary who's really taking his guy by himself because, that's where you have that whole shot or honey hole or turkey shot, whatever you want to call against cover 2 on that side if your corner can't handle that. And, in film speak, a lot of times we call it cover 6, 4+2, to get a cover 6.
And does the corner there, is he responsible for that whole shot and the deep part of that?
Yeah.
As well, or? Okay. So
He's really got to disrupt the timing at the line of scrimmage to prevent him from getting a clean outside release. In a cover 2 look where you're disguising and trying to make it look like quarters, your safety really needs to stay in that. So if you think of it as the 3rd quarter, right? So on the one side, you've got 2 going deep, and then the middle is where the safety would be. The outside corner would be the 4th quarter if you were actually going to play quarters in a typical alignment, you can disguise it, but just in typical. So he's got to hold that hash, right? He's got to hold that seam if he's going to disguise it post snap to make it a different picture. So your boundary corner or your field corner, if you're playing it to the field, you really wouldn't a lot of times. But if you're playing it to the field, he's got to disrupt that timing so he doesn't get a free outside release, because then you've got, from your 10 yards to about 25 yards, you've got kind of an open area that a quarterback can hit in that defense if he reads it correctly. If he reads it as cover 4, he's not going to take that throw because he thinks you're defending it, right? And really, that's the point. The point isn't so much to play a defense that has no weaknesses. It's to confuse the quarterback to make him hold the ball for an extra half, and then your pressure gets there or forces an errant throw. And Louisville really did that a lot in this game. So.
And then as far as pattern matching, this, Nick Saban, this is something he's pretty much known for. Certainly that's where I learned about this, just seeing Saban's defenses for many years. So explain, when you talk about pattern matching, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so, Saban's famous Rip Liz and some of those where your hook zone defender, he's disguising where he's going. Oftentimes your rules, as I talked about earlier, will have the 3, being covered by your hook or your edge who walks out. If you have a nickel, follow him and just take him anywhere. And a nickel, that would be just basically straight coverage. But in some of your pattern matching, your rules will then change, right? So you're going to switch who's dropping into that hook based on depending on which one you're actually calling, or you're going to switch who's taking the 3 in this alignment. And what happens a lot of times is you can then do what's called a robber, where maybe you drop a safety into the post or the dig or the middle areas, maybe some of that mesh that Miami loves to run. You can drop a robber into that hole. And what that does is, if the quarterback doesn't identify that they're matching post snap and he has a read there, you either throw it into a robber, right, which opens you up for an interception. Not really something that happened in this game, but what it can also do is, if you don't see it quick enough, it makes you hold the ball, right? And so that's when it invites the second and third read into congested areas that will then lead to turnovers and things along those lines. I felt like Beck was more confused with the halves and the quarter, cover 6 type looks than maybe the pattern match in this. But really his big problem was forcing the ball into the intermediate deep area instead of taking his check down. There were check downs open on 3 of the interceptions that I found. And so I really felt like Louisville confused Beck in this game and got him to make mistakes.
Lance, we're talking about Beck here in the passing game, but so much has been made about the run game. Kind of the theme this week from the fan base has been running the ball right up the middle. Obviously, last week was not very successful. The run game in general, 63 yards, and we understand that Louisville was doing a lot of stuff to essentially, like we were just talking about, test Beck and see if he was up to the challenge there. And obviously last week he wasn't, the passing game wasn't, but It seems like this is starting to become our weekly question here when it comes to the run game, is diversifying, adding some variety to it. I mean, what did you see last week from the run game that was pretty much, it seemed like the same sort of thing we've seen all year long? Obviously there's been some more success than last week, but the explosive runs just aren't there.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of focus on it the way that I saw it as I was watching it. To me, Louisville has set the blueprint for the rest of the teams this year. I feel like Florida State did some similar things as well, and Louisville really kind of took it to another level in this game. They absolutely closed the A and B gaps and really dared Miami to beat them outside in the passing game. In this particular game, they absolutely ran bare fronts, 2-4-5s, defenses, which is just what it sounds like, right? Two, and then you have a couple of stand-up edges. Because what they were really wanting to do was spill the C's. So when I say spill the C gaps, right? When you think about like taking on a blocker and you're kind of head up into his chest, right? You're going to be, that's an alignment head up or over tackle, if you think of it that way. Well, when you're spilling a C gap, instead of taking them on head, you're looking to get to, and I'm going to use the right tackle as an example, you're looking to get outside of his right shoulder. So you're spilling across his body, right? And what that does is that leaves you outside of him in the C gap, right? So if a runner tried to go there, it'd be a big tackle for loss, right? Because they wouldn't have anywhere to go. So Louisville was absolutely spilling the C gaps on the edges and forcing runners back to where they had numbers in those A and B gaps. We didn't try and run outside much, to be honest with you anyway, but they were spilling it. And that's one of the reasons why, in my opinion, Dawson didn't call me up and tell me, right? But in my opinion, based on what I saw, that's why we weren't trying to go outside runs as much in this particular game, because the way Louisville was playing it, they were spilling it on the outside anytime they anticipated a run. I think, again, these guys get paid millions of dollars to do this job, and I don't. But I think Dawson got predictable in his tendencies, and Louisville did a very good job of identifying those tendencies and really called, AB, flood gap, run defenses, spilling the C on the plays where we were running right into it over and over and over. I think they anticipated our run game in this particular game based on down and distance repeatedly, and we fell into the trap.
Again, this segment is brought to you by CanadaFinancial.com. Remember to call and text Sebastian Canada, huge Canes fan, season ticket holder in Atlanta, 786-213-3909. Schedule a free consultation. If you're a small business owner and tired of being your own accountant, your own bookkeeper, talk to Canada Financial so you can focus on being the CEO and not the bookkeeper. So Lance, basically, and this, I'll tell you what when I ask internally and just talk to people about the run game and what happened, what they're saying, and it kind of lines up with what you're saying, so you tell me if I'm wrong, is that it wasn't so much about inside versus outside. The run game is kind of what it is. It's Louisville took away the run, period.
AKA, there's not going to be much change from what we're seeing.
Right. And well, there could be some variation. There could be, but not wholesale, certainly. But that really their view is Louisville took away the run, period. And where there were missed opportunities were in the passing game. You talked about some of the checkdowns, maybe some of the stuff that you can do in the intermediate game. Does that line up with what you're saying here about how they were spilling and not necessarily just trying to take away the inside run, but potentially take away the outside run as well?
Yeah, that's exactly what the spilling was trying to do. They were trying to make sure that Miami didn't hit explosives on the C gap, which would just be an outside. Because a lot of times when you're talking about these runs and you're talking about zones, they have a built-in cutback, right? So it's not like Dawson says, well, you absolutely have to run it into the center's back on this play or I'm going to be mad at you, right? There are cutbacks built into these runs, right? And if the defender does X, you're able to do a cutback, which is Y, right? And Louisville was first and foremost trying to take away any of that explosive outside cutback runs and force the runner back into numbers. A defense can put numbers into the box, but they can also do the appearance of a light box, right? That then rotates into numbers. And so Miami fell into that trap, in my opinion, a few times as well. And, one of the reasons why we run the duo and one of the reasons why we run the inside zone is because we think that we're going to get 4 yards, 5 yards repeatedly on those runs while avoiding any of those negative runs. It's a trade-off, right? If there were one way to do it, everyone would just do it. It wouldn't be a question. So there's multiple ways to do it. In your, air raid principle scheme that Miami has, inside zone duo is a typical staple of your run game. Miami's had that for years. Last year, we were an excellent run game, did the same things, right? So it's not as though Miami has markedly changed what they've done. I think, one, I don't think that Lyle played a great game, in my particular opinion. I don't think he did a great job of pushing the pile. I think that maybe he was not the best fit for some of the run type calls. I probably would have preferred Marty Brown in a lot of those if you're just going to kind of like grind style. Lyle really is more of a slasher and hit the B and C gap types and hit some of those explosives. And when Louisville was doing their best to take that away and force back inside, I think, maybe Lyle missed a couple of inside runs to where he could have gotten 5-6 yards, things like that. I probably would have preferred a little bit more Marty Brown in some of those red zone areas as well, because that's another key to this game, right? Early on, Miami got into the red zone. I highlighted this last week as well, that Louisville is elite in their run zone defense this year. That's not always the most sticky stat. I hope that maybe we would see some positive regression this week. We did not, right? We saw Miami bogged down a few times in the red zone, and I think they got a little predictable in their run game. And when those didn't pop for their typical 4 or 5 yards, it set up 3rd and 8, 3rd and goal from the 8, things like that. And those are difficult to convert.
Lance, I want to talk to you about Elijah Lofton. There was a lot of talk about him on the last play there. Beck pretty much said that he didn't run the right route on the play, and obviously we have been fans of his, but it just has not worked out this year. He has not looked anywhere near explosive. I think at this point we see him as a guy who can get the ball in the flat and get upfield and get you a few yards, but it doesn't look like he's going to be any sort of vertical threat for you at this point. I mean, how would you utilize him? What have you seen? What do you think about last game from him?
Yeah, for me, I've always had a little bit more of a tempered view of Lofton, because I think
you and I both.
Yeah, I think he kind of fits into a little more of a jack of all trades type of utility player, maybe than more of a focus type player, where he does a lot of things really good for you. I love the way that Danny talks about he's just a good football player, right? Because you could put him in so many different places and he would be a competent football player, right? You could probably play linebacker for you, and get you through a game. He could definitely be a fullback. He could fill, a short yardage role. He can be an H-back, which is, usually the smaller move type tight end. That's the way I would utilize him. I think he's a secondary piece right now. And what separates a lot of those guys that are like the utility types that maybe do a lot of good things, but lack that one, elite trait like size or speed or what have you, like Arroyo had, is they really just have, an IQ that's kind of off the charts. And I'm talking about football wise. I've never met the guy. I don't know his actual intelligence. But on that particular play, he absolutely has to read that, if there's a pressure and he's the hot, that he has to go outside on that play and settle so that Beck has an outlet. Because if he goes deep, Beck has no outlet on that route combination. And I'll get into that in just a second because I have a little bit of a critique there. Don't love that particular outlet in that situation. But 100% put it on Twitter, not long after it happened, watch the playback. That's not on Beck. That is on Lofton. The other 3, maybe they're on Beck. But that one was on Lofton. I imagine that Lofton would tell you the same thing, that he had a bad read and he should have sat rather than going vertical on that play.
Yeah, look, I will take the blame because as everybody knows, I loved Lofton coming out. I never thought he was going to be like an Arroyo type every down tight end or even a field stretching tight end like Arroyo is. It's just not, he is a jack of all trades. To me, the issue I see is, and you broke down every game last year in pretty good detail. I thought last year as a true freshman, and this aligns with what he was doing in practice, he was a much better blocker than he is this year. Just use one aspect of his game. He's 6'1", whatever he is. He's not going to be that guy that just kind of swallows up the edge as an inline blocker. But, just collisions, things of that nature. I mean, I thought, and you tell me if I'm wrong, he was doing that part of his game at a higher level as a true freshman than he is now. I don't know if it's injuries or mental or what it is, but like you take that away and you say, okay, now you are regressing to where you're almost a liability as a blocker as opposed to being someone who can make these collision blocks, these wham blocks and do it effectively. Then you take away the short area quickness. It's like, all right, well, you were a target monster all spring. Now you're a little more lumbering when it comes to getting open. And the running aspect of his game, which we saw in spring, both springs where he was getting a ton of carries, he doesn't have a carry this year. So it's like, I don't know. To me, it's like the things that made him to what I thought was going to be a very key part of this offense, because you stacked them on top of each other. He's really not doing any of those things. And then if you use him as a tight end, just a straightforward tight end, he lacks length and he's not going to get down the field like an Arroyo. So I don't know. Just on the blocking part, am I crazy? You worked on all these games. Was he not blocking better last year as a true freshman?
Oh, there was no comparison. I guessed he was hurt before you told me he was hurt, right? And I'll tell you why. So imagine running to a brick wall and jumping into it, right? What are you going to do? You're not going to go head first into it, right? You're going to turn your shoulder. You're going to shell up and ball up, right? You're not going to have your arms out. You're going to kind of like make yourself a little bit smaller and try and be like a wrecking ball into the wall, right? So keep that visual. That's the way he's wham blocking. The problem is the wall, in this case, can see you and can move and can extend their arms, right? So what is happening is he's just kind of trying to ball himself up and lead with his right shoulder over and over and over into the chest of these guys, and they're moving or they're keeping their hands onto that shoulder because it's when you shrink yourself, it's a pretty easy target to hit as a defender trying to keep you off of him. His blocking's been unacceptable this year, and that's just the truth of the matter. For him to play at this level with this team in the role that we're playing him in, his blocking's been unacceptable. And then when you couple it with the fact that he just has not looked like the same player from a short area explosion, his margins are thin. When you're 6'1", 240, and you're not an elite athlete, your margins are thin. And if your blocking regresses and your short yardage regresses, you're.
Sorry, I because this comment it came to me in the post-game show that I did, and like Studio One Live, appreciate your support as always. I just disagree with this. I don't know if you see the comment here, because we're talking about him being hurt. I agree. We can't use that as an excuse if he's playing, but he says, cut the BS. It's on Shannon Dawson's just not using him. When he's getting the ball, he's not looking good. So I don't know that like getting him the ball more right now is the answer to our offensive problems. Maybe getting the ball out wide, on the flat a little bit more. But again, I don't know that getting him the ball is the answer to our offensive issues right now.
I mean, I can't disagree with anything you say there. I do think he could be a nice outlet. I think you can, use him on some of those dump offs or as a sideline outlet, which kind of brings me to, a problem that I have with that last play. So, you've got either one or two timeouts left. I know you at least had one, but I believe you had two timeouts left in that situation. Either way, you have a timeout left. You're in field goal range. You in this situation have secured field goal range. So you're no longer like trying to, just get 5-10 yards at that point, right? You're trying to not lose yards so that you don't go out of field goal range. And you're trying to not turn the ball over so you don't lose the game. And your main goal is to score a touchdown here, right? So in this particular situation, Louisville is guarding the boundaries. They know that time is running out. They know it's a short yardage play, so they are going to jump those sideline plays, right? Because they're okay if you get 5-10 yards in the middle of the field in that situation. Well, they also know they're pressuring because they know the play call, right? So in this particular case, TJ Coates knows you're going to throw the ball hot because you've got pressure coming, most likely. You're probably going to attack the sideline because of time and score and, just placement on the field, right? So if you already give a defender those two keys and those two tells, right, that's how that interception happened, right? Where your outlet placement just led Coates to it by just inferring what the offense was going to do. I would love to see your hot or outlet be somewhere in the middle of the field in that situation, because the clock's going to stop after a first down. You're definitely going to, maybe not definitely, but you're more likely to be open in that situation based on the situational tells that the defense has. I would have much rather loved to have seen some sort of middle outlet in that situation. I think he probably gets inside the 25 or the 20, if he's a middle outlet there. and who knows what happens from there.
So before we get off the tight end discussion, I do think this is one of the critical issues on the team is fixing the production there. I've heard people suggest just use less tight ends, right? Get more receivers out there. This is an air raid offense after all. You can get more receivers out there. I just don't see that happening from a identity philosophical standpoint. I think this is, using multiple tight ends is really what Mario and Mirabal believe in. I know when Dawson came in, one of the selling points from Mario's standpoint was, hey, he knows how to use multiple tight ends because he had done it in West Virginia, and he's not just your classic air raid guy that has the reputation for building an offense that's not physical and doesn't help its defense. Do you how do you solve this problem where your tight ends are not producing at the level they need to, and your younger players are young, are true freshmen, right? That you don't necessarily, you can't rely on. I mean, maybe you can, but you just don't know you can yet, right? So how do you solve this problem? How do you see this thing getting solved if there is a solution?
Yeah, I mean, not an easy answer, right? The first thing is you've got to put Lofton in a position to succeed, right? You need to understand what it is that he does well and what he maybe doesn't do as well, right? And you can adjust the techniques that you're asking him to do. You can adjust where you're putting him, right? Right now, you can't put him as an inline guy and ask him, to block inline, in my opinion. I really liked, some of the split zone stuff that they're asking him to do a little bit and do leads or, traps and things along those lines. We've already kind of talked about the whams. He needs to improve on that. If you could get him to improve just 10, 20% there, he could be playable in that particular technique, which would open some things up for you. Bauman, he's just limited. He's a limited player. I don't see a lot of things that he's doing wrong from a technique standpoint. I think some of it's just limitations that, God gave him in all reality. So you just continue to ask him to do some of the similar things that he's doing. And then it's a situation with Beck, right? Because we've had instances where they've been open, or we've had instances where he's the 2 or the 3 in the progression, and Beck has really wanted to throw it to the 1 a lot more. And that's something I have seen multiple times, right? Where, Beck has kind of telegraphed on the film that he's going to go to 1, which is his first read in this particular play. And maybe the 2 or the 3 comes open. So it's not the favorite answer for the fan base probably in that situation, but there aren't a ton of tweaks that you're going to do to run the same personnel packages that you're running now that's going to change much until those players either play the technique better or Beck targets them more often. Obviously, if you want to go to a personnel change, you can go a little bit more 3 and 4 wide and ask some of your receivers to do some of those wham blocks for you or do some of those lead block. We've had both happen. JoJo in game 1, had Josh Moore had a wham block in that game, which would be, typically what you would do with your tight ends in those situations. I really like the slot down block, where if you think of him like maybe 4 yards off of the hip of the right tackle, and at the snap he down blocks, he comes down towards the tackle and blocks. I really like that because that's not something that defensive linemen are used to, a player coming from that side of them if they play edge as much. We have done that in the past. Last year we did that with Restrepo quite a bit. Haven't seen them do that much this year, so that would be a tweak that maybe they could do. Josh Moore has this
between Tony and Restrepo. I don't know if that has to do with it.
Could be. Restrepo's a lot more dense of a player than Tony is, and maybe he just has a little bit more physicality in that situation. But I've been fine with Tony's blocking this year, if I'm being honest with you. I don't have any problems with the way he's blocked, and I don't think he would have any problems with attempting it, just based on mindset.
Lance, I know we've been talking offense here for a while, but how do you expect them if there's no Akeem Mesidor? I'm not expecting him to play, honestly. How do you expect them to adjust their personnel-wise?
Yeah, it's probably as simple as next man up.
Who's the next man, Lance? There's very few of them available now.
That's a great question, and I don't go to practice every day, so I can't tell you who they may decide to do with that. You could shift a guy outside some. Moten has played, as a big edge at times in the past and done fine. Last year, he did that quite a bit, and maybe he plays a lot more inside. So I'm sorry.
Have we seen Moten there this year? Because I can't recall it.
No, not this year.
That's not a bad. That may not be a bad solution temporarily. Now your depth at D tackle is not great either, so that tends to be the issue. I think Herbert Scroggins third will be in the mixer. I think he will see. And this is again all under the assumption that Mesidor is not going to play, but I just think they got to be careful with him.
Well, you could also use Lightfoot too. I mean, the thing with Mesidor is it's the weird thing about Mesidor to me is like Mesidor is the boundary defensive end, and he's 260 something plus pounds. He played defensive tackle last year. All his backups are light, just kind of you're like built more like your Jason Taylors. Not saying they are Jason Taylors. I'm just saying body wise. So it's like you got a whole different player backing him up at his position, which is unique to me. Whereas like Bane's backed up by Blunt, who Bane and Blunt are not that much different body wise, not identical, but they're both bigger guys. So it's like that to me is interesting. Do you just have Lightfoot and hey, Lightfoot, you're a 5-star. You've had some nice moments. Play like a starter. Is that what you do too? Could that be an option? Or
there's definitely ways that they can address that, and it could be as simple as playing your backup more, right? Which would be Lightfoot and Scroggins in these situations. You can move a guy outside, kind of like we talked about. If you want to have a bigger body out there, you can also you can replace, and you may end up replacing with creepers or safety inserts, nickel inserts, right? If you go big nickel, you can insert on the edge, some of those things. Do some of the similar things that Louisville did, where maybe you just spill and force back into interior gaps where you have maybe more numbers and leverage. There's all kinds of things that you can do. And if you're going to have a game where Mesidor misses, this is probably the one, right? As far as the rest of the year goes. Stanford is pretty limited from a personnel standpoint. I took a look at them and boy, you got to win this game. You got to win this game. They're not very good. They're not very talented. They really want to kind of like keep the edge clean in this particular game, just like Louisville did. They're really going to look to prevent Miami from, creasing that C gap. In my opinion, we haven't played the game yet, but I think that's what they're going to do and really make Miami grind. You're going to do the same thing if you're Stanford. You're going to really test Beck and see if he will give you the ball. Will he turn it over, right? Because we have seen him spiral in 3-4 game stretches before. He actually improved down the stretch last year, but at Georgia. But in that like middle stretch, he had something like 9-10 interceptions, over a 4-game stretch there. And so Stanford's going to see, hey, can we get you on another one of those in this game, right? They're going to kind of like run those heavy fronts, rotate into nickel post snap, really look to confuse the protection. And something I haven't talked about, haven't brought up, this offensive line is very talented for Miami. And I do believe they've got some real Joes on the line and a lot of talent there, but they didn't play very well in this game. That Sampson 2 penalty. Oh my goodness, was that such a big play in that game, because you can run it twice there, right? And you're probably getting that first down. Who knows at that point what happens? You end up, I don't even know that they scored on that drive actually after that happened. And so the pre-snap penalties, some of those things we need for that to go away. Stanford's going to try and do the simulated snap stuff that Mario's complained about quite a bit in these games. So that's kind of where I see things going for Stanford. They have probably 4 players I would highlight. They've got Colin Wright, he's a nice press cornerback. My guess is you're going to probably try and just let him handle his side. If you run some of those cover 6s I talked about, he's probably going to be the 2 in that cover 6. They've got Tevarua Tafiti, probably didn't pronounce that right, but he's kind of like their edge guy. He's a guy that does a really nice job of setting an edge, but he's also athletic enough to, do an inside move and get some quick pressure. You really want to try and make sure that he doesn't get in Beck's face. They've got a nice tight end. Stanford always has a nice tight end, right?
Yep.
But his name's Sam Morrell. He's a kind of like a Y ISO type, not an elite athlete, but he's a reliable guy over the middle, and he can also block. So, if you do get into those light foot situations like we talked about, he's got to win that. He's got to beat the block of a tight end one-on-one. And then you kind of have a grinder running back who likes to fall forward. I think his name's Tuna Altahir, transfer running back from a smaller school. Not a blazer, but he's, no fun to tackle type. And
sounds like
really
Marty Brown, man. You just described Marty Brown.
He is, he's not Marty Brown. He's not Marty Brown in my heart, but he's Marty Brown on Stanford. So, you can tell I got biases, and then Marty's one of mine. So maybe he's my Lofton, right? Maybe he'll mess up somewhere along this year, and I'll have to be hand up on that one. So.
So Plank Time, Pete, we saw his comment earlier. He's getting at you on the
listen, I told him yesterday, because he said this on my afternoon show, because I went on my Barcelona rant. He said he's going to give $5 a day with the same comment. So I told him we will take it. I will say
I would love the profanity to be removed. It's easier to keep up. We'll keep it up longer.
But Plank Time, I told you yesterday, what lie did I tell? And anything that I said, I'll use it. Stop me when I tell a lie. I'll use a D-money line. If you can tell me what I said that was factually incorrect, other than I did misspeak. I said 15 minutes. So it was 15 seconds, first 15 seconds of the match. But about the club and it just being a scummy organization, I mean, listen, stop me when I tell a lie. Thank you for your support, though, Plank Time.
Thank you for support, Plank Time. So, Lance, New Kick God saying, all I'm hearing is how predictable this offense is, the lack of creativity. Just shifting gears now that we're talking about Stanford. Obviously, SMU right after that. I'm hearing that, that's going to be a pretty big game potentially for the ACC nationally, all that kind of stuff. Going forward, and let's just focus on Stanford and we'll extend it to SMU. What do you want to see in the immediate future with this offense that either we haven't seen or you'd like to see more of?
Yeah, I think I want to see more of meritocracy. I want to see more of the players who are performing, getting more of the time and the opportunities. Right? We've had the opportunity trial runs. Right? We've seen that. We've seen the guys who are talented. We've seen we want to give them a shot. All that's got to go at this point, right? You've got to basically be earning your looks. That's not a criticism of anyone. Coaches got to give opportunities, but hey, to me, Marty Brown has performed better than Jordan Lyle. I think Lyle's got to earn his touches at this point. And when he gets them, he's got to show more than he has. I think that third receiver spot, you got to make a decision, and that guy's got to produce at this point. Whoever it is that you're going to go forward with, if it's JoJo, if it's Josh Moore, if it's Keelan Marion, whatever it is, we've got to see more out of that from Dawson. I've got to see.
Lance, I think we're dropping for a second here. You drop for a second, so take a second
here.
We're
back now, Lance, I think.
Lance, can you hear us? There we go. You're back.
Yeah, so I was kind of ranting about, I want the running back.
The state media.
Yeah, that's right.
The
powers that be.
Yeah,
I heard you talking about their receiver
watching,
cut your leg line.
Too much.
They did, man. They pulled the plug, didn't they? Kind of like Forrest Gump scene in Vietnam. But so I want to see that. And when it comes to Dawson, I do want to see some more creativity in some of those gotta have it moments, right? Where we have really resorted to, a screen in, any kind of pressure, third down situation. We're really throwing the ball behind the line of scrimmage a lot and asking guys kind of make some plays. So I'd really love to see a little bit more middle of the field attack on those 3rd and 3s, 3rd and 5 type situations. And then, I would love to see better answers for your outlets. I kind of touched on it earlier. I do believe you can make your quarterback's life easier by having an outlet that isn't quite pinned to the sidelines so often. I mean, I talked about the fact that on all 3 of those interceptions earlier on, he had an outlet. He did, but they were always on the boundary too, right? So you got Bauman on one of them. He's about 5 yards, but he's way over pinned on the sideline. You got on your Tony interception that was defensive pass interference, by the way, but it was triple coverage. That's not a great decision. If there's triple coverage, you probably got an outlet somewhere open. You did have an outlet, again, pinned to the sideline. Some of those Lofton outlets that I'm talking about, again, pinned to the sideline. And that's a 20-yard throw for a quarterback when he doesn't have much time because he's already under pressure, right? So I would love to see a better outlet game out of Dawson. And then, hey, I don't want to feed the mania, but I haven't loved our run game. I do believe that we have some diversity that we could hit in there. One of my good buddies texted me, "Oh, wow, look at that, an outside run for a touchdown," when Tony, gets a touchdown late in the game. Some of that is our own doing. I do believe that, we want to establish an idea. Again, I'm just guessing here. They don't call me and tell me this, but we want to establish an identity of being a physical, downhill run game team. And sometimes when the defense is inviting that, it's been to our detriment.
So there's a debate going on in the chat. EJ, my guy, he bet me. I still haven't heard the terms, EJ. We got to figure out the terms that Mauanoa would not be a first rounder. He thinks because Mauanoa may project his guard because of his short arms that he'd drop out of the first.
I think that's valid that he's a guard at the next level.
I think he could be, but I don't think that's going to affect his stock too much. I agree. Worst case, what's he? Mikey Apati, who was a first round pick, Pro Bowl type player. So I don't see that affecting his stock. And aside of an injury or some weird off the field thing, which I've heard less than zero off the field concerns with Francis, I think he probably is a pretty middle of the fairway first rounder somewhere that 8 to 18 range, something like that. Where do you see Francis Mauanoa in the draft?
Yeah, I'll answer that in a couple of ways, and we'll wrap this up here in a few minutes. But it'll come down to his testing, like most of these players, right? If he runs like a slug and jumps like a slug, that'll negatively impact him, right? But let's assume he tests as a middle of the fairway tackle with shorter than ideal arms, right? Just look at last year. Look at the state of offensive lines around the NFL right now. And then think about what those teams in the 20s are looking to do, right? Those teams in the 20s are playoff teams. They're looking for finishing touches on their team. What do they need, right? So oftentimes I need, that fifth offensive lineman, whether it's a guard or a right tackle. I agree he's not going to be a left tackle. I think he could play right tackle in the NFL and be fine. Probably not Penei Sewell, but I think he could be fine in that role. All of that to say, let's make the assumption that he tests okay. He's going in the 20s.
Yeah, I think he's going to test great. By the way, I think he's going to test great.
Yeah, I agree with that. Closer to the top 10s. I don't know that.
I don't see top 10.
I would say this: Skoronowski, would he get picked 11 or something? I think he's way better than that guy.
But they do.
But I think he's way better than that guy.
But
like
Tyler Booker. Is Skoronowski not playing tackle though?
I don't know where they put it. He stinks. But Tyler Booker.
No, he's playing guard.
Tyler Booker, who tested terribly. Tyler Booker was like a bottom percentile tester. I think Francis is going to be closer to the top. The arms are going to be small. He's not going to have the length. That's not going to change. But based on what I remember from high school and things I've heard from the program, I think his explosive, all that kind of stuff, the movement with Francis is going to be on the higher end. So,
not the injuries, the penalties got to get cleaned up too. That stuff is not going to help him right now. But
Tyler Booker was 15.
He's taken a step back this year. Mauanoa played better last year, to my eyes, than he's played this year. There have been more than once that I've said to myself, we've got to be better if we're a top 10 pick. And that's probably where some of that bias has snuck in for me, that I'm starting to say 20s rather than, top 10. But it only takes one team. If he tests out of this world, he'll move up. And I do believe, bottom line, he makes his way into the first round at the end of the day because of the need for offensive linemen in the NFL. We had like 7 or 8 go in the first round last year. That's a quarter of the first round at that position. So,
yeah, you look at just guards. As I go through the guards, Tyler Booker last year, the 12th pick of the draft, with very, very poor testing. Gray Zabal, the 18th pick of the draft.
He's a stud.
24, you get to Foutanu. Who's kind of like an all-around type of player, short arm guy, probably more athletic than Mauanoa and less powerful. He was the 20th pick. Skoronowski, the 11th pick in 23. Kenyon Green, another pure guard. He was the 15th pick at 2022. Zion Johnson, another pure guard, or I guess he's also a center at 17. And then Elijah Vera Tucker and Aaron Banks, 14 and 16 and 21. So, my point is Chris Lidstrom back in 2019, 14th pick. There are guards that get picked between like 10 and 20.
Yeah.
I just think if you put him and I'm not saying he is going to be projected only as a guard. I think if you say this guy's a guard, then the size, the testing, the character, the power production, I think he'll end up going somewhere in that first, 8 to 18 is kind of where I'm putting him, but somewhere in the teens. But you're saying 20s, that could happen too. Fountain, who we just talked about, he was the 20th pick. He's not that much different. Donovan Jackson, another guy that maybe a guard.
Yeah. So, he kind of gives me from a college profile standpoint, he gives me a rich man Jonas Avanaya's profile, right? A right tackle, could be a guard as well at the NFL level, could give you a little bit of both, several years of production, started early, kind of same, heritage, so to speak. But, maybe just a rich man's recruiting ranking. So that 5-star stuff matters. Like when you're talking about the draft, you see it all the time. Like the graphics, they talk about, oh, that was a 5-star recruit. And those NFL teams really kind of remember that, right? And they take shots on those guys. Maybe if it's close, that is a separator. So.
Well, that's why I brought up this comment. Charles King says, Francis is not a finished product. His upside crazy. EJ, who has been strong in his argument here, says upside gets you fired. Upside also gets you drafted in the first round.
That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about how he plays. We're talking about where he gets picked.
But listen, he's been.
I mean, he's gonna be an All-American.
Yeah, let's not talk. Let's not like. Has he been perfect this year? No, but I also don't think that he's like sliding horribly right now either. It's probably somewhere in between.
The one that gets me confused is like a Markel Bell. I have heard day 3 for him from people that would know, right? Not these are people in the NFL.
Agreed.
And I like, listen, I'm not going to argue with them. They're the ones making the picks, right? As far as like where he would go, but where I struggle with it is I say, man, he's got the size. He's on an upward trajectory from the way he works, the way he approaches. He's not someone that's kind of like you worry about the character, you worry about the will to improve or the trend of improvement. And it's like, if you look at the film, and correct me if I'm wrong, you break this down more than anybody. I mean, I have not noticed a lot of pressure coming off that left side at all. A little bit in the Notre Dame game, nothing crazy. It was a low pressure game overall. I think it was the lowest pressure game Notre Dame's had in like 6 years. But I've actually noticed more pressure coming from the right side with Mawanoa getting beat than Markel getting beat, just straight man-to-man, blocking guys. Am I seeing it wrong? What do you see from Markel Bell?
Yeah, real quick, I'll touch on a few things you guys have said there. When I say Mawanoa has regressed a little bit from last year, he was a top 1% right tackle, an All-American type. Maybe now he's a top 10, right? A 90th percentile type. So that can be a slide and still be very good, right? So there's a kind of a clarification for that. For Markel Bell, I absolutely see day 3 as well. And I'll tell you why. He's a waist bender that is very difficult to change for an offensive lineman at the pro level. And at the college level, you can waist bend and have that length that he has, push a guy wide. He's one step late at college level. At the pro level, I talked earlier about the 90th percentile. Everybody's the 90th percentile at the NFL level that gets on the field. If you get on the field, you are the 1% of college players in all reality, because just making a team's one thing, but then getting on the field is a whole, extra step for these guys. Those guys are amazing. And so if they notice, a flaw in what you do and your athletic ability, they're just going to mercilessly tear that up. I think he's got the tools to get drafted, but right now, the fact that he's such a waist bender, he has not improved in that on film at all, is going to give NFL teams pause, because if you don't have that ability to really like bend at the waist and you don't have that natural athleticism to do so, it's difficult to train a guy at 25 to become that.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't know his age, using a number, but
yeah, I can see that. I mean, that is fact. He's 6'9", so some of it is just physiological, right? You give on one end, you lose on the other end. I guess I'm just betting 2 things that stick out: just the character of the kid, because I know just being around him and talking to people around him, and then also like there are just no tackles in the NFL. I mean, the Dolphins, using them as an example, some of the guys that they start at tackle over the years.
The Houston Texans have a phenomenal right tackle.
They got one, but they've had struggles themselves and with injuries and stuff. It's like, man, I just looking at our beloved Dolphins who stink. It's like, man, I've never heard of some of the guys that's like, and I follow the draft pretty close. Like some of the guys that we started to tackle over the last 2 years, I have never heard of ever in my life. So it's just that's a position where there are they are struggling to find players, man. It's
Danny, I
rough
come
out
to you
there.
for the hype, man, and you're just bringing me down with my.
Well, listen, Lance, we'll let you go with this then, because we've been asked this question. We've been asked for you to give your opinion on this a few times here, and we'll leave it with this. I don't know if it'll be good or bad, so this is kind of a wild card, but they're asking your opinion on the uniforms this weekend.
Oh man, that's a tough one. You know,
they're
not my style. That's what I would say. And I'm not a fuddy about it. You know, I'm not a super straight laced guy. I love the Miami Knights uniforms. Those are maybe my favorite uniforms in all of football. So, you know, I don't hate everything Miami does from a uniform standpoint and say we got to just have the traditional ones, but they're not my style. I don't love them.
Lance, not a fuddy-duddy Roffers, man. That's his new nickname.
Yeah, right. Well, just saying the word fuddy-duddy kind of makes you sound like one.
Yeah, it makes you a fuddy-duddy.
Yeah,
you can't. If you say fuddy-duddy, you're a fuddy-duddy.
I might be one now too.
I kind of own myself there.
Lance, you are the man. Thank you for Canada Financial for making this a regular thing. And Sebastian, make sure you call him up and visit CanadaFinancial.com. That is CANNATA financial.com. Make sure I get the number before I get you out of here, because again, small business owners, Lance, if you're Lance, you can deal with spreadsheets all day. If you're me and other small business owners, you want to focus on trying to run the company and think about things that don't involve numbers. 786-213-3909. Lance, you're the man. Thank you for joining us. Go
All
Canes.
right, thanks for having me. Take care. Go Canes.
All right, that's always awesome, Pete. So about the X's and O's, we're going to get into recruiting here before we get out of here. First, just want to talk about, you know, some folks that do things at the highest level, just like Lance does when he does his breakdown, just like Sebastian does, and that is U Health Sports Medicine, University of Miami Sports Medicine Institute. If you are an active guy, Pete, I know you've dealt with a situation where you take an injury, you're on the sideline, you want to get back to playing in the post, playing soccer, running around, doing whatever you do. Maybe try to get back early, try to get on, just to get it done, and you don't feel the same way, you don't have the same performance. If you don't want to compromise your movement, your level of play, call the experts at the University of Miami Sports Medicine Institute, whether it's elite competition with the University of Miami athletes or just everyday movement. University of Miami Sports Medicine Institute is the trusted choice for those who demand excellence. Set an appointment today at uhealthsports.com. And last, before we get to recruiting here, we got some news on potential who's the next to commit. Why don't you commit to a cause that is the rare triple win, and that is Play It Forward campaign with KashKick. That's KashKick on the App Store, one of the biggest apps in the country, period. Over 1.5 million downloads, 4.5 plus average rating. Simple. Go to the App Store, download KashKick with the Play It Forward campaign. You use the KashKick app for what it's designed for, which is you aggregate all kinds of games just to waste time, have fun, play around, compete, play games while you got some downtime. You got it right there on your phone. You got puzzle games, RPGs, gamble, solitaire cash. Hopefully you're not Chauncey Billups playing that one. Coloring books, all this kind of stuff on the KashKick app. So whatever kind of game you like to play, they got it all aggregated. You play the game, you make some extra money on the side. I mean, what a world we live in. You can make money on the side just by playing games. I wish I had this when I was a kid. And then with the Play It Forward campaign, the advertiser is going to match that donation with an equal donation or match that money you earn, that income to you with an equal donation to the American Cancer Society. So you get the money, the American Cancer Society gets their own money, and you get to play games. That's all you got to do. KashKick, KashKick in the App Store.
Yeah, I just have like 5 minutes here before I gotta run. Of course, we're here at the legendary Duffy's Tavern, home of the Hurricanes. I will probably be here at some point this weekend, hanging out, watching games. Obviously, we'll be at the Lickin' tomorrow for our pregame show as always. Recruiting wise, though, D, we have some guys in town this weekend. Pretty pivotal weekend, I would say, to kind of regain some momentum after last weekend. The loss there, I think, without a doubt, stuns the momentum somewhat, especially with some of these top guys. But not all is lost. I think there's some good things going there. We'll start here with Milan Paris, who I would say is on commit watch this weekend.
Yeah, anytime you got guys visiting unofficially, they're going to be a potential name to watch, and I think this is particular is a name to watch. Recently decommitted from Iowa State. There's a 4-star player who I think, even as a pretty highly ranked player, he's a 91 overall ranking. He is underrated as you see some of his senior film. This guy is 6'4". Look at the explosiveness, him seeing returning kicks. When you see a tall player like this, especially a tall receiver, first thing you're going to wonder is what's their suddenness, because tall guys can gain speed over time just by striding. How sudden are they? How quick are they? How explosive are they? And I think with Milan Paris, not only do you have testing numbers that seem to back up that is an explosive player, you see him leaping there. I understand his leap numbers were outstanding in the testing circuit, also ran fast. But then you just see, look at him. The quick separation there, hands catcher, and then able to get all the way to the sideline and get vertical finish. This is somebody who I think just has a lot of physical tools. He's been productive. Iowa State, very good at wide receiver evals. They got 2 NFL players last year with Noel and Higgins. They wanted this guy to be the next in line as an NFL player, but he ended up decommitting. I think Miami's got a great shot. But this is a big-time recruit. A lot of schools involved, Oregon, some others. I think
Oklahoma as well. He officially visited both of those places. So this would be a huge recruiting win for them.
But that's someone to watch. He is visiting this weekend. Another name visiting this weekend that is of particular note and plays a position that we always talk about where you need depth, you need bodies. This is one right here who's an emerging body, and that is Isaiah Broughton. Big dude. Watching some senior film here. What I like about him, there's a few things with him. First of all, he's huge. He's easily 340 plus.
340 plus.
You're telling me he was over 400 at one point?
Yeah. We wrote that on the Discord last night as well.
And we've seen some of these really heavy guys become very good. Obviously, if it's Desmond Watson, they gain weight. That's a problem. A lot of times these really heavy guys, when they're losing weight, they have more upside. I think of Inez Cooper, who went through a similar physical transformation as a senior. Another 3-star guy that really exploded. Jawan Taylor from Coco. You may remember he was committed to Florida or to Miami at one point. Went to Florida, ends up playing the NFL for many years. I believe he currently plays for the Chiefs and has made a lot of money in the pros as a tackle. He was one of these other guys that was like 400, and then he got recruiting interest on the way down. So Broughton's one of those guys where it's trending in the right direction. Multi-sport guy, throws the shot put, throws the discus. Also, his brother Vernon Broughton is a 3rd-round draft pick of the Saints. His sister plays college ball. So there's a lot of indicators that you like with him as far as being that defensive tackle to add some size and some athleticism and some upside to that room. You need bodies there. I don't think you'd be like, hey, you get him and you shut down shop. We're mission accomplished at defensive tackle. But I think you are stacking body types and talent that could potentially help you down the road, which in the NIL era, depth defensive tackles or starting level defensive tackles, either one, certainly star level defensive tackles, some of the most expensive commodities in the world. So you better be developing some guys homegrown like an Ahmad Moten for the Canes. So that's one to keep an eye on. But Pete, there's another one who's one of my favorite players in this class period that you think Miami's making some serious progress with, and I've heard the same.
Yeah, and it goes to John Z says, safe to say the loss killed our chances with some of those big flip prospects. No, I would say that's not the case. You have a guy here, Blake Stewart, big-time safety, committed to Clemson right now, and Miami has been trying to work on this one, and I really like the momentum there. Think they're gonna go all in there and try to get this one done because they would love to add another impact guy at safety. Jamar Owens, who was here last weekend for the game, he's someone who's been in the mix as well, but I think really their sights are set here on Blake Stewart.
And to me, this is one of the big-time players in the class. You add a Blake Stewart, you're talking about right to the top of your class as far as potential impact and value, at least in my opinion, goes both ways on the football field, comes from a high-talent area in Atlanta. Really, only place comparable, I think, is South Florida as far as a region. He's got the athletic ability, as you see here, on offense and defense. He's been extremely productive, comes from a great family. He's physical. To me, these are the kind of guys that you invest heavily in because you could just trust them. When you got guys that they check every single box, when you're spending this kind of money, you want guys that check every single box, and I think Blake Stewart does. Look at some of the schools recruiting him of Clemson and Michigan. Those schools tend to have recruits that overperform their rankings. They don't always have the top 10 classes, top 5 classes, but you always see them producing NFL players with guys like Blake Stewart. So I think that is a name that, to me, when you're talking about really being aggressive with players, this is the kind of guy like a Malachi Toney last year, like a Noah. Just you don't have to worry about. You know they're all ball. You know that they have ability. Overall, just football players. They're not like one-trick ponies. They got the size, the physicality, athleticism, production. Checks all the boxes. I'm a huge Blake Stewart fan. Also play for Team Raw Miami a little bit, moonlighted there, and they've had some great players come out of there. Malachi Tony being one of them, Dallas Wilson, you know the names. We've had Duaso on. This is another one of his guys, Bryce Fitzgerald, who's really good safety for the Canes. Wouldn't mind putting these two in as your safety backfield for the future. Big fan of Blake Stewart. I think Miami's got a great shot to get that one done.
No doubt. So great show here at Duffy's. Great stuff with Lance Roffers earlier in the show, and we'll be back at it tomorrow, D.
Back at it at the Lickin' right there in Miami Gardens. So we'll be broadcasting live. Make sure you join us. Beat the traffic, the Saturday night traffic for the game. Get there early. Go to the Lickin', catch your tailgate, whatever you want to do. It's 5 minutes away from the stadium to get your food on, watch other games. Place to be. And then don't forget, if you're in Miami, if you're South Miami, edge of Coral Gables, Duffy's Tavern, not just for the games tomorrow, but also Sunday. They got
the Sunday ticket here, so we got everything.
TVs all over the place. So the home of the Hurricanes. Always love to come here on Fridays. One of my favorite days of the week. Besides Saturday, we're going to watch our Canes. Go Canes.
Hit that like and subscribe.